Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to talk about preparing for standardized tests. Give me 1 second, I'm live, and it just said I got an error, so I want to make sure this is actually working or not. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to talk about preparing for standardized. Okay, it seems that we're live, so let me continue even though it's not showing the right information. So we're going to talk more philosophically and conceptually today, maybe. I just have a bunch of tips. We're just going to go over them quickly, just see what makes sense to people. I get in a lot of scenarios, especially with my students, but also online. People asking a lot of questions. Sometimes it's surprising, sometimes it's unsurprising, because there's ways to enhance your testing situation as you're going into a test. And a lot of people seem to often get surprised at the results. So let's just talk about a lot of stuff here. A lot of it's just common sense, but it's about being rigorous about it and consistent and having a plan, basically, which is my first aspect. Let me put me onto the side here. So we're going to talk about prepping for standardized test. So the first thing you really need to do is just make a plan. You got to make a plan, whether it's how you're going to approach the test, which test you're even taking. In some cases, you have to do something like take the New York State math test, which is coming up in 2 weeks, or you're taking the SHSAT for the New York City Specialized High Schools, or you're going to take the SAT or something like that. By the way, if anybody wants to reach me on GregsTutoringNYC at gmail.com, I do a lot of tutoring, whether it's some homework help, but I actually do a lot of standardized testing. So my specialization really is standardized testing. And as simple as it says to make a plan, it is really important. It's something you need to do. So as we're looking at some of these things, we'll talk about some of those aspects. So the first thing you really need to do is find your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, that's an important thing. Everybody seems to kind of agree with this, and then working from there, you're going to prove your weaknesses. So if you're not strong in something, and you're taking a test. There's different parts to it. It might be ELA, it might be math, it might be science. It might even be part of some of those things. Within each test, there's the whole concept of the subject matter, and then the subtopics within that. So you want to figure out what you're strong and weak on, and improve your weaknesses. And you want to do various things to get to there. Okay, let me just make the screen a little easier here. Get to there. Maybe move me over here. Let me see if okay, there we go. Improve your weaknesses, and you're going to do research on it. You're actually going to do homework. You're going to try to find if you weaken something in that subject matter, how can I make myself better? What is the topics that they're really asking me here? And normally, if you go into a test, hopefully you've done your quote homework and you'll understand what the test is about. That's a major thing here. You're not just going to go into this randomly. You want to know why you're taking the test, what it's there for, what your position on it is, etc., etc. Okay? What you also want to do, though, is improve your strengths. I think this is a big area that a lot of people just zoom right past, which doesn't help them at all. Your strengths are just as important as your weaknesses. And at the end of the day, there's two aspects. One is improving your score, okay, and I actually consider that secondary. And the other thing is learning the material. If you know the material, the scores would follow. Okay, that's my normal modus operandi, my operating mode, which is that if you're prepared, that's what this is. It's prep. It's preparing. So if there's something you don't know, you want to find out what that topic is about. And once you've done that, your scores are going to follow through from it. So it works equally on your strengths. Nobody's 100%, so if you're 90%, 95%, you want to inch up there and still get those working as well. So you also want to be looking in those areas too. So you're worried about your weaknesses, those are your areas of concern, and you're also worried about your strengths, with quote as your areas of not concern. But at the end of the day, it's all important, it all works. So you want to review your areas of concern, which is all of it, both your strengths and weaknesses. Okay? There's a whole bunch of other aspects about pacing and understanding your test and things like that. So each test has a different approach, a different perspective, a different reason for being. Taking a test like the SAT is different than taking a New York State test. They'd have different goals. They're testing different things. Some are just trying to find out, have you mastered just understanding the fundamentals? Another might be, do you know how to use them? Another might be dealing with critical thinking. If you're entering the specialized high school tests or the Hunter test or some tests like that, it's on a different area. It's a different plane. It's testing different things of yours. So it might also be testing basic stuff, but it might also be testing advanced stuff, accelerated stuff. It might be trying to test how you're thinking out of the box. You can also prepare and rehearse for those things too. So you also need to understand how scoring of a certain test works. All tests are not scored the same way. In some tests, there's no penalty for not answering a question, and some tests there is. In some tests, you want to randomly answer, and sometimes you don't, especially if you're running out of time and so on. There's also your pacing. Okay, if you're in a 3-hour test, that's different than if the same test was given you have 6 hours or 2 hours, and all these things like that. So you need to understand all the details of the test you're taking and how that works. Okay. You also want to, at some point, even though you're going to do subtopics and topics, take full mock exams. Means take an old exam or one from one of these third-party books like Kaplan or Princeton Review and things like that, and go purchase those and go through examples. You want to do this both isolated in the topics and also taking a whole full test under as much as the examples as you can. And in some cases, you even want to retake those, and obviously also new ones. But sometimes you want to retake them, and you want to mimic the test conditions as much as possible. So if you think you're taking a morning test, you should be doing the full mock exam in the morning. If it's an afternoon one, you should be in the afternoon. You should be doing normal stuff like getting a full night's sleep, eating breakfast and lunch, and things like that possibly. And what you're doing is you're not just throwing darts here. So you need to assess as necessary. By that I mean, first of all, you should be taking these full-length mock exams, but you should also be focusing micro and macro, and pacing it out and figuring it all out. So that if you keep getting, say, grammar errors wrong and not reading comprehension, then maybe you should be doing some sessions where you're focusing just on grammar. Okay, it doesn't mean to ignore the reading comprehension, but it means to focus on an area like that. Okay, take the prep seriously and pace your prep. Real life gets in the way. Find a routine that works well for you, and don't hijack the session. If you have to go to soccer practice afterwards, then please leave enough time to do the full length thing, or even just a study session, so that you're not racing through it. Similarly, if you went to a soccer session and now you're going to be completely exhausted on the flip side to do the prep, that's not going to work. So find some time and days where you're calm, where you're well rested, where you're healthy, where this is going to work out. Sometimes that happens randomly. If an opportunity knocks, take it. But you should be able to plan these things out too. If you can plan out doing things like going to your soccer practice and being successful with that, this is no different than things like that. On the flip side, you normally know when your standardized tests are going to be, what their dates are, how often they come up, once a year, X times a month, a weekend, a weekday, during school, whatever the case may be, so that you have a way to plan this out, so that at the end you're not just cramming and not focusing and cutting corners here. Again, prep is about preparing, not about racing through examples and saying, "Oh, I did well," and then just flipping a coin on the test day to see how well you did or not. So again, you want to be healthy, and another thing you want to do is seek good help. A lot of people get by without tutoring. It's not necessarily a requirement, but getting an external third-party person involved to oversee and give you advice or thoughts, sometimes it can be bad ideas, which is why you want good help. And as early as possible and keep bringing that person back in. Either it's consistent where you do have a tutor, or at least it's once a month or something where somebody's going to give you a set of eyes and ears to overlook a lot of what's going on. Okay? Because that's important. Otherwise, it's not that you're doing poorly or you're doing it wrong. There might be some light bulb or some super insight that somebody can give you that you wouldn't get otherwise. That could be worth a few points. It could be worth a lot of understanding of the subject material. It could be for you to be achieving your goals. Okay? So one thing about prep is trying to understand what preparing really is about and what it's doing. And you need to know why you're doing it. If you're taking, say, the SHSAT to get into specialized high school, then that should be your goal. If you're not really interested in a specialized high school, maybe you shouldn't be taking this test. Okay? Maybe you're doing it for fun. That's an admirable goal as well. Okay? The other thing that deals with prepping is plan for setbacks. There may not be as much time as you thought there was. You might get sick. A family emergency might pop up. A whole bunch of things. But if you start early enough and you're consistent and you stay the course, then things are going to work out. Okay? And you should be maintaining good health, eating properly, sleeping properly, doing your other chores, also relaxing. That's important too. Okay? Okay, let me shrink this down again because it's falling off the page. So as I said earlier, make sure you're in a time and space where you can do the studying, you can do the prep, where you can focus. What you're normally trying to do is take bite-sized chunks. If you do too much at once, you might overload and crash and burn. Slow and steady wins the race. Be consistent. Be realistic. And if something's not working, even though it seems like it's right, like I should be doing this every day at Friday, or I don't know how exponents work or something. If you going around in circles, you have to try a different approach, which is either asking somebody, using a different source of information, doing more research on the topic, all these things like that. Okay? And you want to do this as early as possible. You also want to establish milestones. A lot of people just start hacking away on test problems, and that's not the way to do this. You want a biofeedback circuit set up. Okay? So that if you were to take like an assessment, and I mentioned that earlier about doing assessments, if you did an assessment, you want to be able to go back and back and back to that. And if you study on the assessments, you're figuring out where you are. You're constantly reevaluating, where's my strengths, where's my weaknesses, what are the topics I'm doing well at, what are the topics I'm not doing well at, what's the part of this test I don't understand, and that's not even topic-wise. It might just be the way the test is set up. Some are in different sections. On some you might have, I mentioned before about how it's scored. Some of them are set up where you have to do the English first in the first half an hour. Something like the SSAT. Not the SAT, the SSAT is set up that way, where you have 30 minutes to do English, then there's a little break, and then you have 30 minutes to do math, and so on and so on. Something like the SHSAT, you have 3 hours to do all sections, and in any order you want. You could do question number 5 of the English, and then question 10 of the math, and go back to question number 1 of the English, and so on and so on. Other tests have writing sections, so you have to figure out a strategy through all this. So it's not only just, that's part of the milestones as well, trying to understand what's happening, but you want the feedback circuit, and you want to be constantly reevaluating where you are. When you started this off, you may have been somewhere else. Now you're somewhere else. So you have to keep pacing that and figuring it out. So there's not just pacing the test while you're doing it. There's pacing your prep as well. Okay? And you want to be improving. A lot of tests have these weird scoring systems where instead of from 0 to 100%, you're getting scores of 800 or 1600, and they don't even start from 0. Sometimes they start from 200 or 400. You want to understand that, and you want to figure it out. The other side of the coin is at the end of the day, if you're getting half the problems wrong, you know you're getting 50%, no matter how the test scores it. So again, it gets back to finding your strengths and weaknesses and figuring them out. Okay? And that ties into your milestones as well. if you took an original kind of assessment, you're getting 50%, no matter how they score this, you know you need to improve. So there's no surprise on test day if you're doing 50-50 that you're probably going to come out about 50-50. You might do a little better, you might do a little worse. The same goes if you're at 90%, test day is test day. It's different. You can practice forever, but test day has different aspects of anxiety, and you may have got to the test late, you had to go to the bathroom, a thousand things here. So all this comes into play, which is why you need to do prep. The stuff you can control, you should control. The stuff you can't control, you just have to accept. But if you got to the point of doing prep at home, or prep with a tutor, or whatever the case may be, you've gotten to a tutoring center, and if you're getting 9%, you know you're somewhere good. So that's your routine. That's what you figured out. That's what you dealt with. Test day, you might do better than 9%. You might also do worse. But without prepping, you wouldn't have gotten even to the 90% to wiggle back and forth from. Okay? So there's all aspects like that. Same when you're doing your prep, know when to take a break. Even during the test itself, there's mechanisms to take a break. Get oxygen into the body, relax for 30 seconds. There's a whole bunch of ways to do that. So there's a lot of checks and balances here. Don't let them escape you. Okay. So at some point you want to determine what your pacing should be on the test. You also want to determine in what order you should be taking the test if they let you do it that way. Okay. That's part of your prep too. Should you do the hard questions first? Should you do the easy questions first? If you're better than math, should you do the math before the English? If writing is your weak point, should you do that first anyway? Should you go to a topic and come back? How do you do double checking? At what point do you do double checking? There's a whole bunch of strategies on all these things that you need to figure out. Okay? And keep in mind that you don't know what you don't know in every sense of the word of this. Okay? Which is, by the way, I mentioned before, getting the opinion of a third party, whatever. Because sometimes that extra set of eyes and ears can be enough to distinguish something that's important that to yourself is an oversight that you're not really understanding or figuring out for yourself. Remember, too, that a lot of test taking is psychological. Okay? So you can convince yourself you're going to fail. You can also convince yourself you're going to succeed. You can convince yourself 1,000 things are going to go wrong. This happens every time I'm tutoring a kid on testing. What if there's no right answer? What if the test had a mistake in it? What if all those things? Well, what if it didn't have a mistake? And what if you knew what you're doing? What if you prepared? So don't always opt for the negative and the worst situations. You can convince yourself you're going to pass, and you will do better if you convince yourself of that. But again, all the rest of the bullet items here have to jive. You have to be consistent. You have to be realistic. You have to study. You have to make the effort here. You have to know why you're taking the test and what's the premise and what it is. And again, get help when necessary and stay the course. Another issue is if you have an IEP or 504, make sure that you figure out how to get test accommodations for that. Whether it's somebody to write for you, read the questions for you, extra time on the test. There's so many aspects of this. Okay? And that's pretty much the bullet list I have. These are things I go over with students that when they're taking standardized tests. Again, I'm GregsTutoringNYC at gmail.com. I do a lot of tutoring, especially in New York City, but also other areas. Long Island, Connecticut, New Jersey. I know a lot about standardized tests, and could probably help you guys out. This is an overview. A lot of this is common sense, but a lot of times people are not following these. And it's just kind of here in one compact way. So again, hopefully everybody's doing well on the test. This is testing season, it seems. There's a lot of, at the end of the school year, a lot of these kind of things happen. All right? I want to wish everybody a good day. Peace out.